Thank you for leading us in worship. I love that song, Holy, Holy, Holy. It's a reminder that when we gather in this space on Sunday mornings that we are worshiping a holy God and we are in his presence. This is not a movie theater or just a regular place that we come, but it's this place where we enter into God's presence. And as we journey towards the Nativity, we are reminded that that is this time where we celebrate, we expect, we look forward to Jesus and the celebration of his birth as he stepped down of heaven into humanity. He became human, Emmanuel, God with us. And so a couple of weeks ago, we began this journey to the Nativity. And so on the first weekend in December, we had this moment to where we were thinking about that phrase, waiting. And as we look forward to Christmas, I think Peyton wrapped us this wonderful present that so many people have wondered what is in this gift. And will we open it today? Doug says yes. And so I even had another person ask me this past week, who's going to open the present? So Doug is definitely, he wants to be top of that list. But at this point, we'll wait just a little while longer. But part of that waiting was the people of Israel during the Old Testament. There was that moment of 400 years of silence as they had not heard God's voice. They didn't hear him speak through the prophets as they regularly had. And so there was that period of silence, that period of waiting until the birth of Jesus, where God enters humanity, this Messiah who was to come, and it changed everything. And so just like we love, one of the favorite things we like to do at Christmas is to buy presents for our kids and to see them open it up. But then sometimes we have to wait to maybe Christmas Eve or Christmas morning to open that gift. So we will wait a little longer. That was the first week as we journey to the Nativity, this waiting, this silence, this our hope and faith looks forward to Jesus. And so as we look forward to Christmas Day, Christmas Eve, we must wait a little longer, not just for this gift, but to celebrate the gift of Jesus. Last week we talked about the journey, that 90-mile journey that Mary and Joseph made to Jerusalem, to Bethlehem, as they were going to be counted in the census, and as baby Jesus was born, there was that journey that they had to take, and just not knowing all that we know, but having the benefit of God's word to read. But also Jesus was on a journey as God's plan for Jesus, for the word to become flesh and for him to be born as a human infant. And all that implies, he stepped down into humanity. And so, but ultimately his journey, the journey that began with Mary and Joseph, the journey that began with Jesus and God's plan for redemption led to us. And our journey, as we anticipate this journey to Nativity, our journey is towards salvation. Our journey is from the manger to the cross because we desire to know this God who made us. And so this morning, as we get ready to think through how does all of this fit together, there's some very other important parts of the puzzle that God uses to prepare us for the arrival of Jesus' birth this Christmas. And so it looks like Brandon is up to something as we put together some pieces this morning of this important puzzle.
Well, so we're talking about this journey. Can you help me turn that real quick?
Oh, yeah, you bet.
This journey to the Nativity. And set that up here, face down. There we go. Wait, we're going to turn it. I have to be complicated. Here we go.
I like it.
All right.
We rehearsed this perfectly.
So, this journey to the Nativity is kind of decorated with a lot of different things. And so, this morning, I know that I think Mallory was up here playing the bass, and before this morning, she's like, "What's this big pile of wood up here?" And so, our journey is going to take us a little different places. So when you're building stuff, you're looking for wood that's good. It's got straight edges. I mean, this has cracks in it and even some nails. It definitely needs to be sanded down. But I think we'll still, there's little pieces like that. We're just going to take this, and some of these wood sometimes it gets twisted. It's not always pretty. There's broken pieces and there's holes in it at times, scuffs, wear and tear, and just probably not always the prettiest of pieces, but it's kind of what takes us on our journey. So as we look, start to kind of piece things together a little bit. Start talking about, if you look in Matthew 1, it's talking about the Christmas story. And we talked about this with our students on Wednesday night, and it's that genealogy, a whole list of who's father and who's mother and all this stuff, just this long list. And so as a believer, when I have read through the Christmas story, I usually journey over to Luke chapter 2, but we wanted to kind of hit on Matthew 1:18, or 1 through 18, 1 through 18, I can't even talk, and see that list. And we're going to talk about that, hit some of the highlights in that list, and basically what it is Jesus' family tree. A lot like this wood. Lots of imperfections. Pretty rough around the edges, discolored. Scars, scuffs. Not real perfect. But we would think this is Jesus, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. He's everything. So this should be the perfect piece of wood. The perfect genealogy. The perfect family tree. See, and if you look at your family tree, my family tree, there's imperfections all throughout it. When I grew up in a small town, northeast Texas, called Hallsville. If you don't know where that is, it's between Longview and Marshall. And it's just a little dot. And at one time, it was one red light. Now, I think we're up to 3. And so, not a lot going on there. But one of the things in our community, we had in between Longview and Hallsville, there was one gas station, and it was a feed store and a meat market, and it was called Palmer's Grocery. It's not called that anymore, but it was a landmark. Now, I'm saying that to say this. If I ever, was in trouble or something, and they go, tell me your name, and I'd go, it's Brandon, and, somebody, and they go, some authority figure or whatever, and they go, you one of them Palmer kids? Yes. They're like, all right, get on out of here. So I had a family tree where people knew our family in the community. They knew who we were. And so on my dad's side of the family, there were 5 brothers and sisters. By the time that they had all passed, none of them were talking to each other. It's kind of a troubled family, family history. My grandparents had about 500 acres of land and lots of cattle, dairy farms, chicken houses, all this stuff. And all that, one of my uncles, I don't know, this is what I'm told, swindled it from the rest of the family. And so then they were mad, and this was mad, and then there was backbiting, and nobody got along, and just this whole family dynamic was just ugly. And it wasn't pretty. None of them liked each other, cared about each other. A little twisted, full of selfishness, greed, envy, imperfections, hurt words, broken hearts, holes, scars, gaps. Probably some of the least likely people that God would choose to use. And so we're going to get to that in just a few minutes, but that on that side of my family, that's kind of my family tree. And probably for most of us, we don't know our family tree beyond grandparents or great-grandparents, unless you've done the Ancestry.com or whatever, sold your DNA to somebody, I don't know. But it's we don't know these greats. But we just learned, and if you read, and we didn't put scripture up here on purpose today. We want you to do your homework. So go to Matthew chapter 1 this week and go, hey, what's this about? And so you're going to look and you're going to see some of these great grandparents of Jesus. Filled with broken pieces, scars, and rough around the edges. So why would a perfect God choose imperfect people to tell a perfect love story?
God has always had a plan for us recorded in his word, the Bible. And as we read, just like Brandon was talking about our family trees, we can read in Matthew 1, the family tree of Jesus. And as we read through this book in our life group, we've been in Exodus and we're remembering that story of God's plan to free his people out of bondage and slavery in Egypt. And as we look back at all of these stories, can you be quieter? We
didn't practice that. I didn't know how loud I was going to be in here. Sorry. We're going to do this a few times, so hang with me. I'm not going to point it out there, so don't worry.
All right, I'm going to watch you this time to see.
Okay.
Let's go.
Let's put 3 in there.
It's not too bad. As long as you don't aim it at me, we're good.
All right.
Hey, that worked. It was a good theory. But, all right, well, as Brandon keeps working on this little small project, as we're thinking back through, like I said, that lineage, part of these imperfect people that God has used to tell a perfect love story. One of those families, you can't help but think about Noah. I mean, Noah was who he was, but God saw righteousness in him. But even though he would succumb later on to drunkenness, you've got Abraham. As you think about him, God had a plan for him to be a father of many nations, yet Abraham even lied about his own family. Of course, there was Sarah, who would experience the miracle of birth at an older age, even though she laughed at God in disbelief. Jacob, he was a deceiver. He wrestled with God, and God gave him a new name. Rebecca, she actually deceived her husband, but God continued through her this covenant. Isaac stole his birthright. He stole it, but God continued to bless his lineage. God had a plan, even though Isaac had his own agenda. Joseph was left for dead in the bottom of a well. His brothers sold him into slavery, but God had a plan for him, and he made a ruler out of him. Judah, he lacked integrity, but God restored him. Rahab, in Jesus' lineage, in his genealogy, she was a prostitute, but God gave her faith. Hezekiah was imprudent. Josiah waged war. And even before we talk about David and Solomon, as you think about Solomon, his great grandson was this king by the name of Manasseh, who is in Matthew 1. He was one of the most evil kings in Israel's history, as he caused Israel to worship these false idols. And it says they were worshiping even more so than the pagan nations around them, which is crazy. But when we think about David, I mean, David was known as a man after God's own heart. He was a giant killer. He was a king. He was a shepherd. But he was also known as an adulterer and a murderer, to the point of where this was written about him in 1 Chronicles 22:8. God said, "You are not to build a house for my name, because you have shed much blood.
But you have, if you think about it, you have Bathsheba, who's also involved in that whole scenario. She's in verse 6 of Matthew chapter 1, and she's known, as one of the women in Jesus' family history. She cheated on her husband Uriah with King David. Their affair ultimately caused the death of 4 of David's sons and one of the most horrific civil wars in the history of our world. Bathsheba's story, it starts off pretty rough, but it ends with her being the mother of King Solomon and Jesus' great grandmother. So God can use these imperfections.
There's a plan bigger than what we can even see. Even in the midst of that adulterous relationship that they had, she still became the mother of Solomon, this wisest man that ever lived, this king of Israel who would be known about his wisdom, but also had 300 wives and some 700 concubines. Does that sound wise to anyone? No, it does not. In 1 Kings 11:4, it actually says this about him. It says, as Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord. So even though Solomon was wise, there were still imperfections in his own personal life. Jesus' family tree is full of all kinds of flaws, all kinds of imperfections, and God isn't willing to let that stop him from making his plan be accomplished. God isn't waiting for you or me to get our act together before he can use us. He's not looking for perfection. God is looking for willingness. God is looking for obedience. And he will use us if we are willing to allow our lives to be placed into his hands as a flawed individual, imperfect. I know it's loud. I can only imagine what it sounds like on Facebook. You know how loud this is.
Oh, there's no telling.
Yeah, we'll live and learn, right? And so it makes people want to come to church next time. I don't want to hear this. But that's the beauty of Jesus' lineage, is God used a lot of imperfect people to accomplish his plan. And I can't help but think about, man, there's like so many of my own stories of my own personal imperfections and flaws. If you need a list, you can very quickly ask Michelle and my girls, hey, give me a list. But I can't help but think back to one of my most memorable moments. I was at East Texas Baptist University, where my daughter is now currently a senior. Brandon actually did some time at ETBU. If you don't know what ETBU is, it's a Christian university. So think of this college full of all Christians who are supposed to be doing the right thing, right? Worshiping, never saying the wrong thing, leading people to Jesus, this perfect environment. We had to go to chapel twice a week, so we got lots of Jesus. It was talked about in our classes. And so I was there to follow my call to be a youth pastor. And so I was pretty excited. But one day, it did not go well. And you'll see the chinks in my armor as I am late for class. I'm late for history. I'll never forget it. It was on the 4th floor of Marshall Hall, this building right in the middle of campus. And I'm running. I am late for class. Anybody ever been late? Maybe got a ticket. Maybe something else happened. But as I'm late for class and I'm running up the stairs, I trip on the top step. In like slow motion, I go, hands first. Books are sliding across the hall. And I say, you could fill in the blank. It was one of those A, B, C, D, F words that came out of my mouth. And everybody, remember, Christians, you're not supposed to use that word. And I was so embarrassed, just grabbed my stuff, went to my class quietly. Here is this ministry student at East Texas Baptist University using that word in front of everybody. That is not the last stupid thing I've done. But in that moment, and even in today, as I look back on what God has done in my life, he has used me as a flawed person who said, God, I love you. Here's a blank check with my life. Use me, whatever that looks like. And so that leads us as we continue on in this beautiful story of why would God use, this perfect God, why would he use imperfect people like me to tell a perfect love story?
One of the examples that we didn't fail to, or we failed to mention, Rusty, I think, was the example of Mary. And not that Mary had imperfections or any of that kind of stuff, but
Nothing. You trusted me with the power tool.
bro,
Sorry to be aim it at you.
all right. I don't even know what happened. I just heard everybody laughing. I'm like, what?
Let's see if this works.
So, in that time, Mary was involved in a very scandalous type situation when Jesus was born. I mean, you can't think that everybody wasn't talking about her, because an unwed teen, going to be a mother, that's juicy gossip for today. But then that was a criminal offense. So it's not that she even had sin or whatever, or the imperfections, because it wasn't even of her own doing. But she was in that situation, not because of what she had done wrong, but because of an awful family history or family tree. But it was because of how righteous that she was. So we all have these imperfections. Sometimes people know our imperfections and sometimes they don't. I mentioned a while ago that, in Hallsville, I was one of them Palmer kids, and, and people knew my story. And I don't tell this story very often, but I'm not bothered by this story either. So my parents got a divorce when I was 15, and kind of I don't even know how to describe their marriage, but the beginnings of their story was that my mom was 19. She was unmarried, and she became pregnant with me. So here's a woman in her early teens who has a family history, who the guy she's with, which is my father, has a family history, turmoil, twisted, not pretty, and she becomes pregnant with me. Now, if you look at that, you can go, well, Brandon Palmer's, as a baby, was an illegitimate child. Okay? And I could look at that, and I could have that hanging over my head, and I've never had that issue. Because God took a situation that, yes, wasn't ideal, wasn't maybe his ideal plan, but he's taken that life, my life, and transformed it into something different. Where over 25, 30 years, I've been able to work with teenagers and people and young married couples and adults where they have shaped me spiritually. God has given me those gifts to shape others. So in an illegitimate situation, an imperfect situation, God can take that and twist it and turn it into beautiful situation. If you look at the genealogy of Matthew chapter 1, those situations were very much the same. They were not ideal. They made mistakes. They had turmoil. They had these things, and it got turned into the beauty of what God wanted it to be. And so why would God, why would a perfect God, why would a perfect God choose imperfect people like me? That's how I entered the world, in an imperfect situation. I wasn't planned by my parents. But see, God sees that plan down the road. He goes, I know this is going to take place. I know this is going to happen. Don't let it detour you. I have a plan. I have a purpose. And it's going to be trading ashes for beauty. And that's what he does. So each person in Jesus, lineage has a story of redemption. God took people from diverse backgrounds and transformed their lives into a beautiful narrative story. Rahab, you mentioned her. Listen, I'm not going to play any games about her. She was a prostitute. That's what she was. And in the story, this prostitute was Jesus' great grandmother. But her life got transformed. James 2:25, Rahab the prostitute was considered righteous for what she did when God gave lodging to the spies. God was coming to wipe out the city, and she's like, I don't want to be a part of that. I want to be on God's side. And she transformed her life. And Jesus' lineage, Jesus could be going, hey, my great-great-great-great-grandparents had an affair and tried to cover it up. It cost thousands of lives. And my great-great-great-great-grandfather murdered one of his closest friends over it. So the lineage of Jesus, the family history, the family tree of Jesus isn't about showcasing a perfect bloodline. It's about demonstrating God's grace, his ability to redeem, his ability to commit to a promise and follow through. So no matter what your past is, no matter what my past is, no matter what your beginning was, what my beginning was, God can redeem it and create a brand new story for you. His grace is powerful enough to turn our mistakes into a testimony of goodness. So the response? The Christmas story is the greatest story that's ever been told. It's a story of God coming to earth to make possible for us to have a relationship with him. But my friend Braden said this a while ago. He's like, hey, what's your favorite thing about Christmas? And he was waiting for my answer. He said, just pick one thing. And I had the right answer, didn't I, Braden? And I said, it's Jesus. Because if Jesus isn't here, there is no Christmas. It's a story of God telling you and me, no matter where you come from, no matter your past, no matter your family tree, no matter the twists and turns, the imperfections, the holes, the brokenness, no matter any of those things, God can fix them. God can make them whole. God can renew. He can sand off the rough edges. He can make what is old and transform it into what is new. But he does not do that unless Jesus is here. So, no matter the mess, no matter if you've gone, I can't do this anymore and I just want to quit. This isn't fun, this is heavy, and I just don't want any part of it. God's going, just let Jesus transform your heart. God uses people who've messed up, from families who have messed up. And that's why he can use you and he can use me. Christmas means that no matter where you've come from or what you've done, God can still use you, and there is a plan for your life. But you have to be open to it.
And just like this pallet back here behind us, we were able to tear it apart, something that was used to put boxes of things on inside trucks. We were able to take it, rip it apart, and build something completely new to make it into this very simple manger that would hold the God of the universe as a baby. I mean, we have no idea what even how our life started or even where we are now, thinking, God can't use me like this. I mean, that's the only way God can use us, is to take who we are. And that's the beauty of the gospel, is in God's perfection, taking us and who we are, he uses us as vessels to tell his story to the nations. I mean, he uses every one of you guys as students to go to your campus tomorrow to tell someone about Emmanuel, God with us, about this nativity story. God didn't come to find flawless individuals to work with. He knew who we were. He knew our sinful nature and what that would look like. But the beauty is that God in his perfection and who he is and his desire to tell this greatest love story, which is Jesus, God come to earth to live a sinless life and to help us see him and to know him and what he did for us on the cross. That changed everything. The power of Christmas is God's love through the life of Jesus. And so this journey to the Nativity reminds us that this perfect God chooses us, and he chooses us to tell this perfect love story. And it's our time, our job, just like we did yesterday with 12 hours of Christmas kindness, this specific, tangible way to go be the hands and feet of Jesus. Tomorrow, the question we have to ask is, what kind of gift am I to those around me? I mean, this is a pretty wrapped gift. Thank you for wrapping this. And we might not look that pretty, but God is using us tomorrow, today, in somebody else's life if we're willing to be given by him. And we thank God this morning that he gave himself to us as the perfect gift.